order here. Study session for Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. Could we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Councilmember Hines.
Present.
Councilmember Bybee.
Present.
Vice Mayor Scazola. Absent. Mayor Furtado.
Here. Is to consider a proposed modification to the city's performance measures. And so I'll call on Natasha Bissell to address the matter. Welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of council. Am I able to share my screen? All right, so good evening. Tonight's presentation is an opportunity for City Council to review proposed changes to the existing performance measures for the City of Campbell. So this was a multi-year endeavor that we kind of took on. We started the initial work by looking at the performance measures and kind of eliminating anything that was manually tabulated, things that were no longer relevant, and kind of started with some low-hanging fruit as we went through this process, because it's a big undertaking. At that point in time, kind of everyone's performance measures were varying, different, and did different things. So it took us a little bit of time to kind of figure out which direction we wanted to go. The city later, or more recently, updated its city's mission to work together with our community to foster a safe, vibrant, small town feel where innovation and people thrive. So the executive team kind of took this as a launching point to work towards changing our performance measures and how they are reflected of the work that we do, as well as how do members of our community understand what our performance measures are and why they're meaningful. So what we did is we kind of took our existing measures and we asked ourselves, what's being measured and is this important? And we asked, why is this measure important? What does it mean? From that point, we kind of asked ourselves, does this align with our city's mission? And if it doesn't, how do we make it align and make it understandable? And then, we asked, why is this important to the community? Does the community even want to know? And then we worked towards revising those performance measures. We found that oftentimes there was a metric of some kind that was there, and for the person who's not involved in the work doesn't understand what the metric means or why it's a valuable metric to the city. So moving forward in this process of performance measures, we took to heart that it's going to need a little bit more narrative to help people understand the transparency of what this means and how the work is being accounted for. So what I've done tonight is in the report, it had the existing performance measures and the proposed. What I've done to kind of highlight this is taken one from each department, not every division, just so we can kind of go through them together. So in the city manager's office, the current measure is 100% of legal notification requirements for council meetings are met. And you'll notice over 3 fiscal years, the reporting out was 100%. And so the question is, why is this important to our community? And what does that mean for us as a public agency? And so in the revised measure, we're proposing that it would read something: ensure city council business is conducted transparently by providing clear, timely public hearing notices that support meaningful community awareness and participation. So in 2025, X percentage of legal notifications were published on time, right? So this is going to say if something wasn't published on time, maybe we were at 98% effective over the course of the last year, but it gives the community some sort of context and understanding as to why that measure is important. In finance, 90% of invoices are processed within 45 days. So again, over 3 fiscal years, you're getting 100%, but for the average person in the community, why is that important? So the revision comes up as support a well-run, responsive organization by processing invoices promptly to maintain strong vendor relationships and operational reliability. People want to know that their public agency is not being fined bills or late fees and stuff for not paying bills on time. And so it's accomplished by meeting all stated AP invoice deadlines without incurring penalties. That's really what our community members want to know. And that in 2025, X% of invoices were processed on time. So again, it's going to say, this is why we're doing it, and this is how well we did last year. In public works, percentage of sidewalk repair requests are inspected and marked within 5 working days. This one has a target. So this was one where we are not sure who made up the target of 90%. We don't know if 90% is what we're doing or if that's meaningful in any way. Over 3 fiscal years, they had varying levels of accuracy, but they always exceeded the target. So in the proposed measure, we're having promote community safety, accessibility, and livable neighborhoods by maintaining sidewalks in good condition. So it's accomplished through routine inspections, repair, and replacement of damaged sidewalks to ensure safe passage for all residents and visitors. In 2025, X% of sidewalk maintenance requests were completed within 15 working days. So it's showing that we're responsive and taking care of these within a 2-week time frame, where it'd be 3 weeks of working days if we're doing 15 working days, but that the city is kind of responding quickly to address those, to create a safe, livable area. Community development, 70% of all new code enforcement complaints are resolved within 1 year. So this seems to be a new one that they started in fiscal 24. So you can see the percentages there. The revision to this one is ensure a safe, well-maintained neighborhoods by responding to code enforcement concerns promptly and resolving violations efficiently, supporting a healthy, livable community for all Campbell residents. These have varying degrees of compliance and sometimes take longer than others. So it's important to understand why we're doing it, but working towards resolving those. So it's accomplished in 2025 by responding to complaints. So we're responding to them within 2 weeks, 14 days, and resolving cases within 60 days. So kind of working towards getting those resolved quickly. In recreation and community services, total number of meals served as a % of meals budgeted. So as a member of the community, I have no idea what that even means. And so rephrasing this one to address senior hunger and health by providing nutritious meals, fostering social connections, and supporting overall well-being in partnership with Santa Clara County. It's accomplished in 2025 by offering X number of meals to seniors in need. So you can see by the reframing, we're kind of helping our community understand why these are important. It's definitely a lot more narrative, but it gives a lot more context to each performance measure. Public safety, current measure, 85% of report requests submitted to the records division will be processed within 7 business days of receipt. And the proposed revision is support a safe, transparent, and well-informed community by maintaining accurate, accessible public safety records, ensuring officers, partner agencies, and the public have timely access to information. I think that timely access to information is key to our community, that we're not withholding anything, and that when it's asked, we're actually reporting out. And this has multiple metrics to kind of show that we're meeting those goals. So then in 2025, X% of report requests were processed within 7 days, and an X% of warrants were processed and entered within 3 days of receipt, and X number of background checks were completed, and X number of property evidence were processed. So the impact of kind of moving forward with the proposed changes is that it aligns with our mission statement. So we're using the same language that is included in the mission. It meets the expectations of our mission statement. We can clearly connect the dots of the work that's being done by staff and how it aligns with the mission. It's understandable. It kind of provides a little bit more narrative and context for community members who are not overly involved in our different departments to understand what work is being completed. And it connects to a real work output number that is tangible. And it's a result-oriented outcome. So it's focusing on the work that's accomplished and not trying to meet some arbitrary goal or metric that we're not certain if that's the right goal that we should be having. So the last portion of this is whether or not we want to continue to name them performance measures. This is totally a conversation for council to decide upon. Some alternatives that we've come up with are service objectives and results, strategic goals and key metrics, service outcomes, public service outcomes or results for our residents, or we can leave them as performance measures. It's really kind of the pleasure of the council of how you want to incorporate this into our budget document. Our hope is that this would be something that we would do on the calendar year. In some instances, the information is more relevant and needs to be on the fiscal year, and that would be very clearly indicated in all of those. But that this would be a document that would be presented to council prior to the priority setting session. So you can see the work output from the previous calendar year as you head into setting priorities for the upcoming calendar year. And that can help drive some of that, and then it would be incorporated into the budget. So for tonight, for the study session, there's four questions for council that we're looking. Does the style and format of the proposed revisions meet your needs? Do these resonate and make sense with you? Are there specific measures that you're not in favor of or that you want revised? And do you prefer to keep the name performance measures, or does another name make more sense? So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions, and I hope we can maybe work through some of these and have a dialogue.
Thank you, Natasha. It's a very nice summary. Yes, appreciate it. Questions by the council? Yes, Sergio.
Thanks so much, Natasha. I just wanted a clarifying question for the very beginning. Could you give an example of a measure that required manual tabulation and why you chose to move away from that? I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I just want to make sure it's aligned with the other goals that are.
This was probably done several fiscal years ago. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Those were ones that we kind of pulled away several fiscal years ago. For us, I know in our division we had like number of residents, right? And it wasn't more of a number tabulation but it was like we serve our community and our community's residents and non-residents. So it was one that we kind of removed from our thing as not being super relevant, because our goal is to service the community. And so, but I would have to go back and check with other departments to see if they had actual, like, that they were hand counting.
Okay, but it doesn't sound like that was a big current issue, you know.
No, that was several fiscal years ago that we started kind of, how do we trim these down? How do we make them more relevant? And that was kind of the first steps that we took.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
I don't have questions, but I have comments on several of the measures, and I'm not sure how we're gonna go through those page by page, or I don't know what the process is gonna be.
Maybe we can just do questions right now, and then we'll come back, and actually, we probably should go through the ones that you propose.
I too have several specific ones that I have, just ideas only, but I don't have any questions, but just I'm a metrics person. I've always wanted qualitative and quantitative measures, and this is just a fantastic product that you've produced here. So really look forward to that. I really like, I won't get into the specific ones, but I really like removing the significant manual effort ones to calculate. Those are ones that it's hard to justify if it takes a lot of time, and then if you get questions on it, it's hard to back it up. So I think that's really good. I like the clarification on the calendar versus fiscal. I had a question on that. So it's good to get that a little clearer that it's going to be calendar events. I really like doing it before the work plan sessions. That's good. And I like in a number of places that you didn't have targets, which is fine, because you can set the metric, and as you get history with it, then you can do more timing around it. So those are kind of my general comments, and then I'll have specific ones on as we go through it.
Okay, thank you. And why don't we go ahead and we'll just consider your comments, and then we'll go back and take a look at the questions that we've been requested to answer.
Okay, so to me, the performance measures have been a longstanding practice that that has gone along with the budget process, and it's a gauge for council members to really identify areas where our resources are going and are we meeting the target, and if additional resources are needed, it helps to quantify that. And so to take out some of the quantification and just make it a more broad statement kind of, in my view, defeats the purpose of what the performance measures, whatever you want to call them, really are. And they've, in the history of the city, have been pretty much connected to the budget. So I want to start off with that. And in the city manager's office, there's the newest version is ensure responsive and transparent city services by addressing resident concerns in a timely and accountable manner. And the metric is in 2025, all resident concerns directed to the city manager's office were provided responses. Well, it doesn't tell me as a council member how many concerns, how many complaints were received, and it doesn't provide a timely course of action. So if somebody, submits a request today, a month later, they could be getting a response. And I think that we should be doing better than that as far as responding to complaints and concerns, and that there should be some metric as to how many complaints we receive. I know how many I get as a council member, but as it escalates up the chain, how many and how they're responded to. Is it a written letter? Is it an email? Is it a phone call? So I think that one particular one needs to be worked on a little bit. Do you want me to go through my whole?
I've also pulled them up on the screen, so
Okay.
if you have them,
Okay.
everyone can follow along.
Okay. You want me to proceed?
And I get to go through my list.
Okay. Again, under 515 Human Resources, the second bullet, in 2025, number of employee inquiries were resolved in a timely manner. Well, again, that's somewhat open-ended. What is timely manner, and how many inquiries did HR respond to? That would be helpful to me. And
part of this discussion can be, what is council's timely manner? Is it 7 days? Is it 2 business days? What are some of those things that you would like to see? Because in the first instance, for me, that would be a manual tabulation, right? Of how many were, complaints or issues were sent in. In this one, when we use timely manner or completed on time, those are things where if you want to say, we want things resolved in this amount of time, then I can go through and, tweak all of those.
But I think it's more, on the first one, it's not really a manual. Maybe it's manually inserted into a document, but there's an Excel spreadsheet that the manager's office uses to respond. And so it seems like it shouldn't be an extra burden to produce that information. That's just my insight on it. Under the volunteerism, again, it says HR supported number of volunteer hours throughout the organization, but what does that really equate to in the terms of FTEs or dollars that the city's saving on volunteer efforts that are done by groups rather than having to pay city employees? So to me, that would be beneficial information to have. Under economic development, in 2025, number of businesses were assisted to ensure they relocated within the city. Well, how many were not relocated within the city? That would be helpful information to have as a council member. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not the council.
We appreciate all the feedback. This is a draft and a work in progress for us, so it's the more eyes, the better. So it's totally fine.
Under finance, the first bullet, this is accomplished by initiating or completing assigned work plan items in fiscal year 2025. What percentage of work plan items were started or completed? But it's helpful to know how many were started, but how many were completed? That's helpful information. Let's see. Moving on to transportation engineering, which is page 49, if it helps you. The last, promote accessibility, equity, and safe mobility. And then the metric is in year 1, 2025, replacements were completed for number of accessible pedestrian signals and number of countdown signals. Again, it would be helpful to know how many are on the radar to be improved and not necessarily just the number that's completed. And it looks like that's like over a 5-year period. And then under engineering, the second bullet, about the engineer's estimates, in 2025, the number of CIP construction projects were awarded at or below the engineer's estimate. I think it's also important to know how many projects are completed within budget. I mean, that's in the last couple of years, Public Works has been very successful in completing projects either at budget or below budget. And that's, to me, a positive thing that we should be touting. Again, under street maintenance, 760, it also alludes to how many requests were actually received as opposed to the percentage that were responded to. And I think the same under community development, I didn't see any response on citizen complaints there. Specifically, and I know myself personally, there's been a couple times this year where there's been not so timely response on citizen complaints. It's taken 2 or 3 times to get an answer. And to me, I think we should be having a better standard there. And then under building, it speaks to the average time from building permit submitted to permit issuance was X amount of weeks. Well, what is the average time? Does that vary year to year or cycle to cycle?
I do believe that one varies. And
Okay.
so, yeah.
Okay.
I would assume that's based on staffing levels and things for them. So it could, in times of lower FTE counts or whatever, they could have longer average times would be my guess.
Okay.
And if I can add too, it probably depends on the types of permits. Some permits are more complicated. And one year we may have more simple permits, another year we may have more. So it's a blend. So they probably will change. The idea is as we go through these, you'll see that trend. Because after a couple of years, you'll start seeing last year it was perhaps a permit issuance time was 2 weeks, and then maybe it's 2 weeks and 1 day, and then it's 3 weeks. And so when you start seeing those trends, it's going to give us the ability to start asking some of those questions, but we can hone in on that one.
Okay. And then under public safety, under records, it talks about the number of background checks that were completed and the number of items of property and evidence that were processed. So does that mean that there were 100 background checks requested and they were all completed?
I think this is more to show workload. So background checks are fairly lengthy. And so the number that were actually completed in a calendar year is, I think, just more of a metric of how much work is being conducted.
Okay.
And same with property evidence. And like Brian just referenced, as we move through these in calendar years every year, you'll start to see that workload shift. You'll see how it either maintains at the same level or there's big increases or big decreases.
Okay. And then under recreation and community services, under the first, the administration, the goal is, I guess, to attain 69% capacity in all programming. Is that?
That's not the goal. That was me quickly trying to figure out what the number was. And threw a number in
Oh,
instead of
okay.
using XX
Okay.
like I did in other ones. So yeah, so that's just, it goes back to trying to figure out, is our goal something, or is having to reach a goal the important thing, or is it reporting it out and then deciding that's not the goal, or that's not as much that we want, right? And this would be a good example of, is the attendance not at the level that you want at the community center? And and if it needs more resources, or why is it low, that's the question. And so, for me to put 100% just shows, okay, you guys are full, but to see, if I was showing you a number of 69% of our classes being full, or that's out of all the potential, it changes that understanding.
Okay, and that kind of leads me into my final comment on the community center, where it talks about the second bullet, issuing the number of permits in 2025 for athletic fields to maximize our use. So I guess I would ask, what is our capacity, and is that hard to quantify, or?
I'm not in love with either of these two metrics still. This one's still, I think, a work in progress for us. Mainly because these are ones that don't really tell the story about how busy we are. And so we are still working through on a good metric for our room rentals and our fields.
Okay.
Mainly because we could have, 12 different groups utilizing our fields. And in fact, if we issued 12 permits, it's really not 12 permits, because they're using our fields 7 days a week. And so it's how do we capture the available time that's being used? And that's really challenging with our current system to get out.
And I'm hearing you talk about capacity, so maybe there's a way we can turn that into looking at the number of day capacity of the fields or something, or the number of day capacity of the rentals. There's a good dialogue to help us
Yeah.
vet through these, because it was hard to get to this point.
There's a lot of them.
Nice
So
to have
you-
some feedback from the council's perspective, because you're more community facing.
Thank you for indulging me.
No, we appreciate
Well,
Okay,
well,
please.
I'm gonna do the same. So just again, Natasha, it's just excellent work that I do feel that the department heads and the departments are the best group to be able to define the metrics. Now, once you define it, yeah, the council may come and have other ideas, and so other additions, and that's what I'm gonna go over here. But really, just excellent work on that. In the 510 and 511, you made a comment about transparency. We all know that we're transparent. We all are continuing to do it. That's what this whole council meeting is about, transparency. But I think we need to say it. Let's see, Susan Ellenberg has that in her for the county, and I think that's appropriate for us to continue to emphasize that we've got that transparency. 515, I think it'd be good to know the number of candidates per position. So if it's not one candidate per position, if it's one candidate per position, we're not really getting a good candidate pool. It's all about what's the candidate pool for various positions. And then along with the.
So just for clarification, if we had 10 positions posted last year and each position had 150, you would want to know the total number of applicants to the number of positions that we had? Is that what you're asking for?
Well, it's the number for each position, how many applicants? And you might have had for 10 positions, it was the same 150 people. That's fine. But being able to know, really what I'm trying to get at is being able to know, are we advertising in such a way that we have a good pool of people that are applying for these positions. So.
Sometimes we have to max them too. So
Well,
we
and
have
I
to say
think
first 100 candidates and then it closes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
so
that's fine.
Each
That's fine.
position's gonna have a different candidate pool. There's no target for each one, but there's a way that we could probably aggregate that into administrative positions at a candidate pool of X amount. maybe aggregate a certain group, so we're not, because there's every recruitment would have separate.
Yeah, it's the position that only has one candidate. You know,
Right.
that's really where,
We-
it gets this, concerning.
Yeah.
When we
I
have
think
that.
those would be rare, but I think we can find a way to try to aggregate those. For instance, public safety, maybe in one category, administrative,
Mhm.
field services and other things, maybe we break those, but there's a way we could probably address that.
And then, Councilmember Bybee talked about the volunteer hours. What I was really wanting to understand is what is the non-staff volunteer hours? And maybe you implied that, but it wasn't really clear that it was non-staff volunteer hours. In other words, community volunteer hours. How many volunteers were involved? And that was in 515.
So you want the total number, not just the hours? Like how many physical body people were?
No, hours is fine, but it didn't, in there, it didn't specify that it was non-staff. Maybe that was just an assumption. But it's, I don't, I really care about who is, how much of the community is engaging on those. And in the run, you had like, I don't know how many, 50 volunteers.
We have a lot of volunteers,
that
yeah,
were
so
out
we can
there,
call them community volunteers.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. And then 547, this is for this where there are, we should have a metric on intrusions. It should always be 0, but I think we need to make it public that how many intrusions we have, so that it better stay 0, but we want to be able to let the public know that it's going to be 0. For my finance, there wasn't a number associated, but under finance, I'd like to have a clear distinction of continued funding for any approved work plans or adjustments thereof. What I'm talking about is that if there's a work plan or finance for a particular plan that goes part year, we want to know that it's going to only go part of the year and not go on a continuous basis where we have to kind of find funding as it goes. In other words, the work plan and the finance line up exactly to what the expectation and the duration of the work plan are. I don't have a number, but that was.
So clear, I'm lost on this one a little bit.
The situation is if we have a work plan we put together, and maybe we only have finances for it for half the year. Then we get to the second half of the year and the work plan is still in place, but we don't have finances for it. I'd like to get a feel for where we have situations like that.
Okay, quantify.
It puts us into a budget deficit or a work plan deficit situation.
So if we're doing this on the calendar year, by mid-year, we would be halfway through a fiscal year, so we could report out how many in that fiscal year are not going to meet financial allocations.
The timing of it doesn't matter as much to me, so.
But we would be reporting this about this time annually,
Yeah,
so we would
I understand.
So it would give us an idea for how many of the work plans need additional funding.
Or what work plans had been put in place that didn't have funding. So, yeah, I guess that's the same thing.
That sounds good.
Yeah,
Yeah, hopefully that doesn't.
hopefully
happen.
we don't have it.
We like to
Hopefully,
say 0.
yes, yeah. And if it is 0, that's great.
Yeah.
Again, it's fine to have a metric that's 0 because that shows that we're monitoring it and we're managing. That's the same comment I had about intrusions. It better be 0. But let's put a metric in there to be able to understand that. Let's see, 715, I didn't see anything around there around the conservation plan, promotion and implementation of the conservation plan. It's an excellent conservation plan, but there needs to be some tie-in to be able to implement that, the conservation plan that's been put together. And I know I've made other comments about it, but no, we want to be able to have some way that we're moving along in conservation because we're seeing a lot of that from our constituents. 720, the biggest bugaboo that I hear is traffic calming. I don't see a traffic calming measure. I'd like to see some sort of a traffic calming measure on being able to determine that. 524, there was it didn't seem like we had a comment around inclusion and of the diversity, race, age, orientation, identity in 524.
We don't collect that information. You're talking about in 524 recreation,
Yes.
about demographics on our population that attend our
Yeah.
programs.
So we
don't collect
can't,
that.
we can't
Mhm.
do that. Okay, all right. So then just a couple of them, I don't know where they would fall into, but grants applied and received. I think it's a good measure for us to be able to do. Have a education connection. There's a lot of conversations that are going on around the reduction in enrollment rates. And so where we have a connection to the education community of being able to, I know that we are not responsible for public education, but there should be some sort of a connection that we have to it. I'll let you come up with what the idea might be. This is only recommendations and ideas. You're real good at metrics. So, yeah.
That one, I don't know.
Homeless homelessness into housing. I didn't really see that measure. I know that we're struggling with our housing program for homelessness, getting homeless into housing, but being able to have some metric around it. And then one that I'm concerned about, the move, RENA 7 version is coming up. What our metric is on that and the progress on RENA 7. It is RENA 7 is the next one, I think, that we have. What I'm really concerned about is being prepared so that we don't get into it and have a bunch of developer remedies that we're grappling with. But again, these are just my ideas as we were talking about to be able to include it. I'm going to come up with another. I know we have to be careful on the diversity and inclusion, but I think we need to have some message around it.
I think where we can do that would be more around, and I thought we talked about this about adaptive programming, and that's our way of kind of doing
Okay.
inclusivity in our stuff.
And there's probably a way we could target by the demographics or the groups that we provide information to, and more diverse groups, not just the same groups.
Yeah.
Reporting on how we get that information out to diverse groups.
Sure.
Versus
Okay.
collecting how many of each group participates.
Right.
But
Yeah.
showing diversity.
Yeah, and race,
Okay.
age, orientation, identity. So being able to, that's a good way to describe it. Sorry to go through so many, but
It's okay.
thank
We're
you.
here for.
Thanks so much. I think generally speaking, rather than go through individual ones, I just want to offer some broad feedback because I largely agree with what my colleagues have said before me. I think first, I just want to say how much I appreciate the work, Natasha, your leadership, all the other department heads working on this, and all of the employees pulling this together. I think everything is moving in the right direction of what we need. But I think as I sit back and reflect and also just hear the conversation, I think in all likelihood, we may just have to have kind of an iterative process, try to get as close as we can this year. But I ultimately think the value is going to be after we collect the data and see that, then we can start to see, okay, are we both tracking what we need? And if we are tracking what we need, what do we then do with that information? So I kind of think that it's going to be a little imperfect. That doesn't mean we can't tweak it to get it better, but I'm okay with that as long as we bring it back and find out what we're doing, and then continue to not just make these metrics better, which I think is a worthy goal, but then I think it's what we are able to do with that data that will be the real value. And so broadly speaking, I think many of these, and I think Councilor Bobby put it really well. To me, many of these feel as if they're missing a portion, and I'll throw out a few themes. One of them is exactly what, I don't want to completely lose the quantification as we're moving away from the old metrics. I think as Councilmember Bybee was saying, I think there is value to having that and having that target. I think what is here helps provide better context to whatever that number might end up being. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't still have some kind of target to hit for. Otherwise, I think we're going to be limited in the value of these. The other issue that I saw pop out in a couple of them was where a metric is kind of open interpretation. And there, I think we either need to just define it, so at least anyone who's reading it has a common understanding, or just tweak it to get something more concrete. And just as one example that I think it shows up in a few places, so this isn't to pick on anyone, but the economic development metric had something like number of business connections made for one of them. As a reader, I think that's on the right track, but it doesn't tell me what exactly that means. And so therefore I can't really gauge what the value is. Again, it's not to pick on that one. It's just an example of something I saw come up in a few of them, although I think it's, in terms of the value of, I think it's very much on the right track. It's just about contextualizing that so anyone can understand. So with that goal in mind and realizing that it's not going to be perfect, I don't think I need to go through each of these as long as we can take that kind of general feedback.
Clarification
from that.
on the
Go ahead.
economic development one.
Yeah.
So with that one, prior to our economic development manager, his exact title, that wasn't happening. And so by knowing that this person is contacting X number of businesses on an annual basis and building relationships, I guess that was the avenue we kind of took with that one. So are we looking for, we want more, or we want to set a target of this is what the council would like to see the engagement to look like versus this is the work that's being completed?
No. So like I'm saying, I think the value, which is we want to be a resource. What I read this,
yeah,
we want to be a resource and help support our business community. I think the issue is the vagueness of connections. I don't really know what that means. If that means a phone call, a workshop, a mailing, it just doesn't really mean anything. And so, again, it's less focused on that particular one. More, I would just go through the document as a whole and say, is there anything that could be interpreted differently by someone who's reading it, who may not have the expertise of staff who does this on a daily basis? Because I think the value of metrics is that we can get a common set of data and facts that we can then base decisions off of. That doesn't work if the shared understanding isn't there.
Isn't there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that
I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's the only reason I use that example. I didn't think any of these were really too far off the mark in terms of the value that we're trying to serve by serving our community. So appreciate you letting me expand on that one. That's really just my overall feedback. And other than, I think it'll be an iterative process and we'll continue improving. I think this is valuable work, and I support the direction that we're going. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to take public testimony. If any member of the public would like to address the council on the subject of tonight's study session. Anyone like to talk to us? Seeing none, I don't believe there's probably anyone online. Okay, fine. So, Natasha, I wanted to ask you now, based on what you've heard so far, at this point in time, do you want us to go back to those questions and sort of try to answer them right now, or do you want to come back at a different time for
I guess for me, I'm getting consensus that people are in favor of moving towards this more narrative approach. Correct. I'm getting consensus that the council is in favor of moving towards a more narrative approach with the suggestions that were provided this evening on specific metrics and some more clarity, and some more clear goals set in some of these performance measures, correct?
Yeah.
So based on that, you're suggesting that we shouldn't have to do this right now?
Well, if we are all in consensus of that, I think we've kind of answered like 1, 2, and 3. So I think by going through, there's consensus that everyone kind of likes this format, that they seem to resonate. We've gone through some of the specific things that people had questions or comments about that I've taken copious notes, as has Brian. So it kind of comes down to the naming of them. Do we want to keep them as called performance measures? Would you like to change that? And then I think before we close, just kind of an agreed upon thing that this is a working document on an annual basis that allows for the conversation and dialogue to happen between council and executive team during priority setting or whenever, to kind of have liberty to make changes so that they're meeting the needs of everybody.
If you could go back to the slide of other suggested titles, yes, good. But, so just keep that for a moment. Brian, did you want to say something at this
Yeah,
point?
just a couple of thoughts on that. As we were talking about using numbers and metrics, we're not trying to get away from quantifying the results. And I heard a lot of comments about it'd be nice to have a quantity. I think the goal is to achieve excellence. And so there's not a target specifically, but the metrics can describe what it is we're trying to achieve. And then the measurement in the results that we describe will tell you how good you are at achieving that, and you'll see a variance of the year. And so we're happy to do this, and we'll continue to make some changes as you see it next time. So we appreciate that feedback. Before we get to the alternative names, I would say that this was a discussion we had with the exec team on numerous occasions, and we struggled with putting labels on what it is that we are doing, and we sort of put that on the back burner because we were working so hard to label it instead of trying to achieve the result. And so we really just did table this, and it's just open-ended, and it's not the end of the world. We can change the names of it, but if there's feedback on what you would like to call this, we're open to that as well.
Just offhand, I think a more descriptive term would be appropriate than performance measures. It's a little bit nebulous. In fact, the first one there, department objectives and results, or service objectives and results, sounds good to me, but I wondered if my colleagues have any comments.
I think I could be convinced of a number of different specific choices, but I will say that I do really like including service in there, because I think it gets to what is the point of capturing this data? What are we trying to do as a city? And I think the common measure across departments is that we're all trying to serve the public in some way. So I think that'd be an interesting one. And by the way, we don't have to get this and get into this here, decide this, or maybe it's for a future year. But it kind of raises the question for me of how can we think about measuring what the council does as well, because we're part of the city and the departments, and so it just might be interesting to get that data, make sure that we're on track, but beyond the bounds of our discussion today. But anyway, I like having service in some way to just keep us honest and remind us why we're doing this.
I like the first one, service objectives and results, and I just think that it's important, since we're redefining what performance measures are, that we change the title and move forward in a positive vein.
I'm indifferent as to the name, but I think community is a good word to be able to include in there in some way. So because that's what we're trying to develop is a better community. I do want to really reiterate what Councilmember Lopez said about being able to take this, move forward with it so that we can get progress, because if we continue to reiterate on what the metrics are going to be, then we can't really do the activity that we're trying to do. So being able to get the community service metrics, or whatever you want to call it, moving forward so that there can actually be progress that's done, I think it's important to get it to that state.
Does that provide you sufficient information at this point?
Yes, that will work. So we will work to revise these and have them ready for you at priority setting session. And then it can be a continued conversation, but we will do our best to have the 2025 information. And any that are required to be fiscal year will be clearly outlined in the response in there, and they will be for fiscal year 25, year ending. So just for some clarification as we move forward, and thank you for your time.
Excellent work.
Thank you very much, Natasha, for your presentation, but also the work going into this to bring it to this point to us. Thank you. If there are no further comments, I will adjourn the study session. Oops, banged the wrong topic there. Thank you.